I'm a 27-year-old woman working as an assistant manager at a boutique law firm. I'm the type who keeps things simple. I like schedules, clean spaces, and gifts that serve a purpose. I've never been into loud celebrations or showing off, just not my thing. My birthdays usually pass like any other day, a home-cooked meal, maybe a card, maybe not. But this year I let myself expect more. My old smartwatch had stopped syncing a couple months back, and I'd been dropping hints about needing a new one. I wasn't subtle either. I'd talk about how late I was running because I missed a meeting alert, or how my calendar wasn't syncing and it threw off my entire day. I even circled the model I wanted in a magazine ad that I accidentally left on the kitchen counter. No one said anything, but I knew they saw it. My cousin Talia is 24. She used to be a fashion and lifestyle influencer. I say used to be because her brand deals dried up, and she moved back in with her parents, my aunt and uncle, who live just a few blocks from my own parents. Talia doesn't walk into a room. She enters like a stage light just hit her. Everything she does has flair, loud, curated, dramatic. My mom, who's always been into appearances, treats her like a prized possession. According to her, Talia's style is something to be admired. I've lost count of how many times she's asked me why I don't wear brighter clothes or fix my hair like Talia. A week before my birthday, I was passing by the kitchen when I overheard my mom talking on the phone. She laughed and said, "We got her something that'll make her life easier. She's going to be thrilled." That was the first time in years I felt a real flicker of excitement. I convinced myself they had listened for once. I thought maybe, just maybe, they got the smartwatch. My birthday dinner was at my parents' house. Small gathering, just family. I walked in with a bottle of wine and a store-bought cake. Talia showed up 30 minutes late wearing a sequin jacket and heels so tall she had to be helped up the porch stairs. She posed in the living room like she was at a photo shoot. My dad laughed. My mom asked her to stand by the window because the lighting was better. Dinner went how it usually does. My dad talked about lawn care. Talia brought up some old PR trips she went on in Ibiza, and I passed the salad bowl around like I was invisible. Then it was time for gifts. I saw it right away. A bag from the high-end electronics store downtown. The logo was printed on matte black with silver foil, exactly where the watch I wanted was sold. My pulse picked up a bit. I stayed quiet and waited. My dad handed me a card, then looked over at Talia and said, "You go first, sweetheart. She has somewhere to be later." I didn't understand why she'd be opening a gift at my birthday dinner, but I didn't say anything. Talia pulled the gift bag toward her and opened it. She gasped, then shrieked. She held it up like she'd just won a prize. The exact model I had asked for. The one I'd researched, budgeted for, talked about. My mom clapped and said, "It suits her so well. She'll appreciate it more than you would, honey. You probably just use it for work things." I didn't say a word. I didn't touch my cake. I didn't even open the card. Later that night, I got home, took off my shoes, and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I replayed every second. The bag. The way my dad looked past me. My mom's voice. Talia's grin. I didn't cry. There wasn't any big outburst or dramatic scene, just silence. But in that silence, something very specific clicked into place. This wasn't just about a smartwatch. It wasn't about missing out on a piece of tech I could buy myself if I wanted to. This was about being the last priority in a room full of people who were supposed to know me best. I'd spent years giving them quiet support, babysitting, hosting brunches, helping decorate for birthdays, fixing resumes, picking up prescriptions, always showing up, never asking for much in return. But now I saw it. They didn't forget me. They overlooked me on purpose. Because I didn't demand attention, they decided I didn't need any. I stood up, turned off the light, and lay in bed. That's when I decided this wasn't going to be another birthday I let fade away. If they thought silence meant indifference, they were about to learn what silence could really do. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't beg to be seen. I'd simply start shifting the spotlight. No arguments. No fights. Just changes. One by one. They wanted to treat me like I was background noise? Fine. I'd remove the music. Let them feel the silence for once. I didn't say much after the birthday dinner. I stood up when it ended, thanked everyone for the meal, and drove home in silence. No dramatic goodbyes, no passive remarks. Just walked out like it was any other night. The next few days, I went about my routine, work, errands, cooking for one, but I wasn't just letting it go. I started writing things down, times they brushed me aside, prioritized Talia's wants over my needs, or made me feel like an extra in my own life. The list grew faster than I expected. Last year, when I got promoted at work, I was excited for once. I told my parents I wanted to host a small dinner to celebrate. My mom agreed, until Talia announced she needed the backyard for a last-minute content shoot with a local brand. Suddenly, my celebration was canceled. They didn't even tell me directly. I only found out because the tablecloths I'd reserved were still in the trunk of my mom's car, untouched. At the family reunion, I wore my favorite block heels. As soon as I stepped in, my mom whispered that maybe I should switch to flats. Talia was feeling short and self-conscious. I stayed quiet, took them off, and spent the whole day barefoot on damp grass while Talia posed with her arm on everyone's shoulder. Then there was the funeral. A distant cousin passed away, and the service was quiet until Talia stood up and started talking about how inspired she was by the man's free spirit. She'd met him twice. My aunt clapped. My mom said she was proud. I sat 2 rows behind and watched her turn a memorial into a stage. I kept going down the list. Every time I had to be less so Talia could be more. It wasn't about a watch anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. So I didn't bring it up with my parents. No texts. No long talks. I wasn't interested in having another conversation that would end with them pretending not to understand. I wanted to show them. Quietly. Clearly. I opened my work calendar and put in requests for 3 Fridays off, each spaced 2 weeks apart. No one asked why. I had the hours and I'd earned them. I started calling the plan in my head the mirror effect. My idea was simple. I'd treat them the same way they treated me. Polite, distant, and easily replaceable. I skipped our weekly Sunday family dinner for the first time in months. I didn't offer an excuse. I didn't answer the follow-up texts. I didn't even read that came in from my mom's number Monday morning. I left it on read. The following week, my mom sent me a photo of centerpiece ideas for Talia's upcoming birthday dinner. Usually I'd be the one picking up decorations, ordering cake samples, and driving across town for last-minute touches. This time, I just replied, "Sorry, swamped at work. Nothing else." I started pulling back from everything slowly. When the family group chat was active, I didn't reply. When they sent event invites, I marked them unread. No fights. No scenes. Just gone. The space I used to fill with energy, help, and attention went quiet. At work, I signed up for a lunch and learned about managing workplace stress. While there, I ran into a junior associate I didn't know well. She mentioned she was studying for the bar and feeling overwhelmed. I offered to review her outlines with her over coffee. That became a weekly thing. In the evenings, I stayed in and finally worked on my side project, curating a portfolio of public interest cases I wanted to volunteer for. It had been on my list for a year. It felt good to do something that didn't orbit around someone else's timeline. During this stretch, I also began working on something more personal. My parents' 30th anniversary was coming up. In our family, milestone anniversaries were always big dinners, toasts, gifts, slideshow presentations. I'd been the one organizing them since I was 18. This time, I planned something completely different. I started calling venues, but not for a party. I found a small restaurant that let me book a semi-private room for 12 people. I made a list of who I'd be inviting. My aunt, who once helped me move apartments when no one else offered. My cousin Nina, who always defended me when Talia mocked my outfits. My grandfather, who told me I reminded him of his late sister, sharp and quiet but never wrong. My parents weren't on that list. While all this was happening, Talia's birthday was fast approaching. My mom asked if I could help her pick out dessert flavors. I sent her a link to a bakery and told her I didn't have the time to go in person. She sent a thumbs up. That was it. The pullback was subtle but constant. My parents weren't used to me saying no. They weren't used to me not being around. At first, they acted confused. Then it turned into silence, which was fine. Silence is where I work best. Meanwhile, I kept refining what I'd do for the anniversary. It wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be bitter, but it was going to be clear. They liked image, I'd show them one. The kind they couldn't crop or edit. That was phase 1. Phase 2 would land on Talia's birthday, and it would land with precision. Talia's birthday came 2 weeks after mine. It was held at the same restaurant they'd booked for my last promotion celebration before it got canceled. They rented the private room, decorated the walls with gold balloons, and filled the space with loud music and louder people. I showed up right on time. No early help with setup. No emergency cake pickup. No errands. Just me and a small gift bag that didn't have Talia's name on it. The dinner kicked off with the usual fanfare, people taking selfies, servers walking around with trays, Talia making sure everyone noticed her new extensions. She was dressed in glitter again, smiling like she'd just accepted an award. When it was time for presents, I stood up and walked over to my uncle. I handed him the gift bag, nodded once, and took my seat. Inside the bag was a vintage record player I'd restored myself. He'd once mentioned during a family barbecue how much he missed the record player he had in college, back when I still attended those gatherings. I'd found a similar model online, cleaned it up, rewired the speakers, and bought a vinyl of his favorite artist to go with it. Everyone paused. I looked at my uncle and said, "He'll appreciate it more." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at anyone else. I just smiled, picked up a glass of water, and took a sip like nothing had happened. Talia didn't say anything. She blinked fast, then looked at the unopened gifts still stacked in front of her. No one moved for a second. Then someone tried to break the silence with a laugh, and the conversations picked back up like they were trying to pretend nothing had shifted. After dinner, I helped clear the plates, thanked the host, and left early. That night, both my parents tried to call. I didn't answer. I sent a single text that said, "I just wanted to do something thoughtful for someone who's never made me feel invisible." Nothing else. Over the next few days, I made myself more available, but only to people who had never minimized me. My cousin Nina asked if I could help her prep for the LSAT. I started going over flashcards with her 3 times a week. My aunt had to run a late shift and couldn't find a sitter, so I stayed with her twins and helped them build a blanket fort. My grandfather brought out an old typewriter that hadn't worked in years. I cleaned the keys, replaced the ribbon, and typed out a thank you note on it. These weren't random acts. They were deliberate. I wasn't pulling away from the family. I was shifting toward the ones who had quietly stood by me this whole time. I wasn't cutting ties, I was tightening the right ones. My mom sent me a message saying, "You're being distant." I replied with a thumbs up emoji. No words. No space for guilt tripping. I kept my tone cool, never rude, and never explosive, but unshakable. No explaining myself. No offering clues about what I was doing. Just a different rhythm. One where I wasn't showing up unless it actually meant something. While that was happening, the anniversary plan moved into full swing. I booked a sleek little restaurant downtown with dim lights, long tables, and a view of the skyline. Capacity for 12. The guest list included my aunt who helped me when I was in a car accident, my cousin Nina, 2 friends who'd driven hours for my birthday 2 years ago, and my grandfather who still mails me newspaper clippings he thinks I'd enjoy. My parents were not invited. On the evening of their anniversary, I showed up at their doorstep, handed them an envelope, and left. No conversation. No eye contact. Inside the envelope was a card. It read, "You'll appreciate each other more without me there." Tucked inside was a printed photo collage of all the people I'd spent the last month with, laughing, eating, studying, playing. I was in the middle of every photo. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail. My dad asked to talk, said they wanted to understand what was happening. I deleted it. Later that day, my mom sent a message that was paragraphs long. She said this wasn't like the version of me she used to know, that I was acting cold, that I used to care. I didn't reply, because she was right. This wasn't like the version of me they had gotten used to. That version was gone. The new version wasn't interested in begging for decency or shrinking to be liked. She was still polite, still kind, but no longer available to people who needed her quiet just to make their own noise louder. And that was just the beginning. After the anniversary dinner came and went without them, I figured my parents would take the message and leave it alone. They didn't. A few days later, a delivery guy showed up at my office with a box of muffins. My mom had ordered them from a bakery I used to like in college. I told the receptionist to send them back. I didn't even open the lid. That evening, my dad sent a one-line message, "Hope work is going well." No context. No follow-up. Like things could just smooth over on their own. I didn't reply. From that point on, I made it simple. Anyone who had downplayed me, ignored me, or used me wouldn't get access to me. No invitations. No favors. No casual check-ins. My aunt, Talia's mom, called me about a family brunch they were planning. I said I wouldn't be coming. Not unless the environment included actual respect, not performance-level politeness while everything stayed the same. She tried to laugh it off. I didn't. While they circled around trying to pretend nothing had changed, I started shifting more energy into my own life. I signed up for piano lessons at a small music shop a few blocks from my apartment. I used to play when I was a kid, but gave it up because family weekends always came first. Now, every Saturday morning I was in that studio practicing scales. At work, Amanda from HR told me about a nonprofit that offered mentorship to young women entering law school. I applied that week. 2 weeks later, I was paired with a first-gen college student who had just been accepted into 3 programs but didn't know how to compare offers. We met at a bookstore cafe every Sunday. Weekends filled up fast. And this time, none of it included folding chairs to someone else's party or baking 4 dozen cupcakes because my mom forgot to order dessert. Meanwhile, Talia posted photos of herself wearing the smartwatch almost daily. One post had a caption that read, "Finally something that matches my vibe." Another had her holding a green juice while pointing to the watch and writing, "Real ones know." I didn't comment. I didn't care. She could wear the gift. I had already made my point, clearly and quietly. The only time I agreed to attend a family function was when my grandmother personally asked me to come to her garden lunch. She'd always treated me with quiet respect. I arrived on time, stayed in the background, and kept to myself. During dessert, my uncle pulled me aside near the drinks table and said my parents were having a hard time with the way things had shifted. I told him clearly they weren't hurting because I was gone. They were unsettled because I stopped smoothing things over for them. My grandmother handed me a glass of iced tea and leaned in before I left. She said, "About time you chose you," and kissed me on the cheek. I thanked her, waved to a few cousins, and walked out before the cake was cut. No hugs, no photo ops. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started planning the next step of the mirror effect. A game night. Just a few people. Intimate, relaxed. Only those who never asked me to shrink myself for someone else. There would be snacks, board games, some soft music, and one small detail that would turn the entire room into a message without me having to say a word. It was time to make sure the right people were around me, and make sure the wrong ones knew they weren't missed. I kept the guest list small, 10 people total. All of them had something in common. They treated me with respect, consistently, even when no one was watching. I cleaned the apartment top to bottom, pulled out the extra chairs, laid down a cozy throw on the couch, and lit a few candles. It wasn't fancy, but it felt solid, warm, chosen. I didn't invite my parents. I didn't invite Talia. I made sure to avoid the family group chat and sent out personal invites one by one. When my aunt mentioned it in passing, word clearly got back to my mom. Later that night, she sent a message that read, "You must have forgotten to include us." I didn't answer. I hadn't forgotten anyone. The night of the game night, guests arrived with wine, snacks, and stories. I handed each person a small envelope before we started. Inside was a note. Each one held either a quote or a memory, something specific they'd done that made me feel seen. My cousin Nina got one that mentioned the time she spoke up when Talia made a rude comment about my clothes at a family dinner. She held the note for a while, then tucked it into her purse. My grandfather's note came with a framed photo of his restored typewriter. I added a caption that read, "Some stories deserve a second draft." He placed it next to the fruit tray and smiled at it every so often. We played board games, passed around chips and salsa, and talked. No one interrupted. No one turned every conversation into a story about themselves. Nobody made jokes that cut the room in half. There was space for everyone. No performing. No background roles. Then came dessert. I walked out of the kitchen holding a cake shaped exactly like a smartwatch. Black fondant band, silver edible screen. Right in the center, written in bold white icing, was, I guess I didn't need it after all. There was a beat of silence, and then someone burst out laughing. Soon, everyone joined in. Nina leaned back in her chair and clapped. Someone asked if it was about Talia, and I didn't say yes. I just smiled and cut the cake. Photos were taken, not posted, just kept. 2 days later, I got a message from the building receptionist. Talia had shown up, likely having gotten my address from a family member, and was waiting in the lobby. I told them I wasn't available and asked security to walk her out if she stayed longer than 10 minutes. They didn't need to. She left on her own after 5. That same week, my boss stopped by my desk. He looked amused and a little confused. My mother had called his office directly, pretending she was following up on an old conference they'd both attended months ago. She didn't ask about me outright, but the timing was too obvious. I contacted a mutual family friend who often acts as the messenger during family misfires and passed along a clear warning. If anyone in my family contacted my workplace again, I'd file it as a formal breach. No conversation. No room for misunderstanding. That message hit its mark. There were no more muffins. No more vague texts. Just quiet. But I knew they still hadn't understood what this was about. They thought I was being cold. I wasn't. I was just done pretending they didn't know what they were doing. So I began sketching out the next part of the mirror effect. Something final. Not dramatic, but unforgettable. I called a jeweler friend who also dabbles in novelty pieces and gave her a very specific request. I wanted a replica smartwatch, same size, same brand logo, same box, but made of chocolate and wrapped in gold foil. She laughed at first, then got to work. A week later, she handed it to me in a sleek matte box tied with a white satin ribbon. It looked identical to the one Talia had opened on my birthday, except this one would melt if you touched it too long. I scheduled a courier to drop it at my parents' doorstep with a card inside. The message was short: some gifts are hollow, just like the thought behind them. An hour after delivery, my aunt called livid. I didn't entertain the guilt trip. I said, "You all treated me like I didn't matter, and still expected me to bake pies for your parties." Then I hung up. A few days later, my building's concierge let me know someone had been waiting outside for nearly half an hour. My dad. He hadn't called ahead, he just showed up. He stood by the door for a while, checking his phone, looking around like he was expecting someone to come out and greet him. I didn't. He left without speaking to anyone. That same week, I came across a fundraiser Talia had launched. Another side project, some influencer-branded homeware line that was already behind schedule. I donated under a random name and left a note that said, "For appearances." The donation wasn't large, but enough to show up. Word got back to me through a cousin that Talia had no idea how to feel. She couldn't tell if it was an insult or encouragement, which was fitting. That's how they'd always made me feel, half acknowledged, half dismissed. At the annual family barbecue, I didn't attend, but apparently my absence was mentioned more than once. While everyone stood around the grill, one of my uncles raised a toast to those who prioritize their peace. He didn't name me, but Nina looked right at her phone afterward and texted me a photo of her smiling beside the drink table. 2 weeks after that, the original smartwatch, the one Talia had been flaunting, broke. She dropped it during a day in the life video shoot and cracked the screen beyond repair. She posted a crying selfie, captioned with, "I don't even know what to do right now," tagging the brand for support, like a customer rather than a cousin. My mom commented, "We'll get you something better, princess." That was the last time I searched either of their names on social media. Instead of spending energy reacting, I started building something. I used the bonus I got from my firm and partnered with a local education nonprofit. I partnered with a local nonprofit to create a small annual scholarship in my grandmother's name. It was for girls applying to law school from underfunded schools, ones who couldn't afford application fees or test prep materials. When my grandmother passed away a few months later, the family gathered for the memorial. I arrived early, sat in the third row, and waited quietly. No one had told me I'd be speaking, but when the organizer called my name, I stood up and walked to the podium. My parents looked surprised. Everyone else just watched. I told a story I hadn't told before, about how my grandmother once found me crying in the garden when I was 12, upset after being excluded from something. She sat down beside me and said, "Be the kind of woman they don't forget, not because you were loud, but because your silence made the whole room shift." I ended the eulogy there. No dramatic pause, just truth. As I stepped down, I looked across the room. Some faces were uncomfortable. Others were proud, but every single one was paying attention. I didn't need a spotlight. I'd already built something brighter. Months passed and nothing exploded. No dramatic fallout. Just a slow, steady settling into silence that no one tried to fix. My absence stopped being a statement and became routine. The space I left behind didn't shrink. It became a wall they didn't know how to climb. Talia launched a podcast with 2 other influencers. The branding was loud, the intro music louder. It lasted 4 episodes before going quiet. My aunt mentioned to a mutual that she was going through a creative rut. No one asked me to tune in. Around the same time, an invitation arrived in my mailbox. No return name, no personal note, just a printed card for a family dinner for everyone to reconnect. I tossed it in the recycling bin. That night, I had dinner with my mentor. She'd just nominated me for a leadership training abroad. At the restaurant, we ran into a senior partner from another firm. He recognized me from a joint case years ago. Midway through dinner, he asked me to send him my resume. There was an opening on his team. That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't trying to earn my family's attention anymore. I had built a space where people saw me for who I was, not what I could do for them. My grandmother's estate was settled soon after. She left me a handwritten note tucked inside an old recipe book. It said, "Don't hand your worth to those who drop it." I framed it the next day and placed it by my desk. Nina and I stayed close. We traveled to Lisbon in the spring, ate pastries by the river, and laughed until we cried when a street magician messed up his own trick and blamed it on crowd energy. I hosted New Year's Eve at my apartment. Friends, coworkers, and a few cousins I still saw regularly showed up with casseroles and homemade desserts. We toasted with sparkling cider. No one talked about who wasn't there. Someone asked if I'd ever made peace with my parents. I said, peace doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it's just not hurting anymore. That was enough. On my next birthday, a card came in the mail. No name. Just a plain envelope with a message inside that said, "Hope you're doing well." I wrote return to sender in black marker and dropped it back in the box. Talia posted about getting engaged to a photographer she met on a shoot. They had a beach ceremony in Mexico. No invite came. I made pancakes that morning and listened to jazz. My life isn't loud now, but it's steady. Full of people who text just to check in. You ask before assuming. Who bring extra forks without being asked? I never got that smartwatch. But on my solo trip to Iceland, I bought a compass necklace at a local market. It hangs by my window now. A reminder, my direction was never theirs to decide.